Welcome back to Social Studies. We are actually going to be wrapping up here with our chapter 10, which is forming a new government. So our intention today we're learning about how the Articles of Confederation and the Three-Fifth Compromise. Now we are learning how these two things really formed our country and how it really formed our government and some adjustments we needed to make after the Articles of Confederation, Three-Fifth Compromise. So, the Articles of Confederation. So, basically, what this was, Americans had to create a new plan for government for themselves. They wanted a republic, which means that all are have a voice. So, here are the Articles of Confederation in a synopsis. Government should not have too much power over the people. States would keep their freedom and independence. States will be joined in a firm league of friendship. So that means that the states, instead of doing their own thing, would actually work together. The plan could not take effect until all 13 states ratified it. So, what ratify means is to approve. So, all 13 states had to approve before they could form any sort of government. Each state had one vote, needed 9 out of 13 to pass a law. So any law they wanted to pass had to have 9 out of 13 of those states to say yes. So what they decided was a central government. So the article set up a central government with only one branch. Now, here's a weakness because today we have 3 branches, which we will learn about in our next video. So this is called the legislative branch, the part of the government that passes laws. So without the executive branch, which would be our president, or the judicial branch, which would be our law system, judges, this left a lot of flaws. So basically, the government could make laws and pass them, but had no one to enforce them and no one to say, okay, yeah, that's part of the law or that's not, which is what our judges do now. So weakness is they can't collect taxes. There's confusion with money from state to state because this was before we had our dollar. So we did not have the same sort of currency going from state to state. And they couldn't trade with other countries. So there was a lot of countries that wanted to trade with the United States but couldn't do so because we did not have a government that had the trading ability to do that. And there's no executive or judicial branches, which we touched upon in our last slide. So we had this big meeting to say, all right, let's fix this. Let's come up with Articles of Confederation. So this was called the Constitutional Convention. So this happened in May 1787, and there were 55 delegates, and they met in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. James Madison of Virginia and Alexander Hamilton of New York were both very young at the time of the convention, but were important to the Constitution process. So, if any of you have seen the new musical Hamilton, Alexander Hamilton, this is what they were talking about. George Washington was elected the leader of the convention. Now we know George Washington was our first president. He was very successful in the American Revolutionary War, and he didn't want it, which is why they elected him, because he did not want the power. But since he was such a strong leader, they decided to vote him in anyway. So everything had to be kept a secret. So guards replaced the doors and the windows were nailed shut. So this is before air conditioning, and see how they're dressed in this very big coats. This was all made out of wool. So it was very hot in there because they didn't have the windows open and they went all the way through the summer. So it was dreadfully hot in this convention center. So they came up with 2 plans. The first plan came from Virginia. Now Virginia is one of the more bigger states at the time. So Congress would get more power. Executive branch needed to be created to carry out laws. Judicial branch could be created to interpret the laws of Congress. And smaller states didn't like that the larger states had more power. So basically, they decided that it should be based on your population, on how we should have delegates. So if you have a larger population, you got more people in Congress. If you had a smaller one, you had less people. So option 2 was the New Jersey plan, which is a smaller state, that each state would have the same number of representatives and all states would have equal power. So no one really liked either of those options. The big states didn't like the New Jersey plan, little states didn't like Virginia plan. So they had to compromise. So they decided to have the two houses, which we have today. So we have the House, which is based upon our population, and then we have the Senate, which every state gets two representatives. Then they had to decide, well, what about our slaves? Do they count as population? Because the southern states still had slaves and the northern states did not. So enslaved people would be counted as part of the state's population, but they'd only count for 3/5 of a person. So each slave, instead of counting as one whole, would count as 3/5 of a person. So if a state had 50,000 slaves, only 30,000 people would be added to the population count. So here's our quick quiz for today. So, what were the main weaknesses in the Articles of Confederation? 2. Why was trading with other countries important? And 3. Why do you think the Three-Fifths Compromise was accepted? Now, remember, like this, back when this was set, slavery was still a popular source of labor. And so they didn't outlaw slavery for several more years. But to think that they could count a person as 3/5 of a person, why do you think that was okay? So, next time we're going to learn about the Bill of Rights and our Constitution. So, thanks, fifth grade, for tuning in, and I will see you next time.